So welcome, 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 our brilliant colleague Peter. We so appreciate your consistent leadership and solidarity. And as always at Setsi, we begin all things by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So Peter, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work, sir?
Thanks so much, Victor. It's great to be here. And before I introduce myself, I did want to talk just a little bit about the land that Hollyhock sits on. Hollyhock, I'm the CEO of Hollyhock, and Hollyhock sits on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of Slaman, Holmoko, and Klahoose nations. And I've been in the role for 7 years, and what I will say is that one of the strongest parts of the role has been building direct partnership with the Klahoose Nation that's on Cortez Island. And one of the moments that stands super true for me is in 2019, the Klahoose landed their boats on the beach in front of Hollyhock, and that was the first time they had landed their canoes there since colonization, a process that we all know is ongoing. And the power of that moment, the complexity of that moment of me, a white man, welcoming them to land that was never properly transferred to people who look like me, holding the title to that land, and yet being in partnership, and the generosity of the indigenous people to actually even continue to show up in the system that has caused so much violence to them is one of the strongest moments of my career, 7 years at Hollyhock. So I just do really want to honor elders, past and present and future, on that before I get started. So yes, my name is Peter Wrinch. I'm the CEO of Hollyhock. As I mentioned, I've been there for 7 years. Hollyhock has been called a lot of things, but the way that I like to think about it is it's a leadership lab for building the connection and resilience we need to be the humans to build a society that we want. And so at the base of our work is this commitment that we are all connected, and that when humans are connected to themselves, to each other, and the natural world, it builds more compassion, more love, and it really furthers a society based on those values.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for all that rich context and history. I really appreciate your leadership and the way you're able to share so concisely and clearly. So my next question is, what's inspiring you right now? What has you curious, or what's keeping you up at nights?
Yeah, I appreciate the frame. So it's been it's like a slow train coming for me on this question. I think over the last number of years, and in some ways, inspired by our global experience of the COVID pandemic, the idea that as the world gets more challenging, more nuanced, more complex, that we really need each other, that we really need each other in ways that are different than we've been living. And there's lots of ways that people are talking about this. Resilience is a word that comes up often, but I think it's more than just resilience. It's connection and joy. And so that's what's really inspiring me right now, is just thinking about where in the work of Hollyhock, this social impact work, this social change work, can we find deeper connection and joy and presence? I was in a gathering recently. I didn't really know what I was getting into. I just joined the gathering, and it was led by a colleague and friend of mine, Kari Wendell McClellan, and it was a facilitators gathering. So I thought, we'd get there and we would do some tools on facilitation. But what blew my mind is that every session came down to relational connection, relational connection. And I had this like very profound question for me that I walked around with for weeks. I was like, well, if we're not in our day-to-day life, in our day-to-day working, if we're not holding up relationships, what are we holding up? What are we making primary? And what I could come up with was production, transaction. And I really am inspired right now by the idea of what does it look like to really center relationships? What does that do to our meetings? What does that do to the way we relate to people?
So helpful, and I couldn't agree more. There's so much work that needs to be done around relational infrastructure and the way we show up in conversations and how we connect with others. So once again, I just really appreciate your candor and transparency. So my next question is, what challenges and barriers do you face in your work? And what are some of the approaches you and your colleagues are taking to overcome some of these challenges and barriers?
Yeah, well, the first thing that jumped to mind, Victor, is this relational piece. I think that Hollyhock is I would describe it as a pretty progressive workplace, and so we do make a lot of space for the full human experience. And at the same time, I think that we're all living with colonized minds, and so and that this is a real learning for me. It's a real reckoning in lots of ways, because I'm very much a product of modernity and agendas and linear thought and the primacy of rational thought. And so really taking time to create the space in our conversations, in our meetings, for what wants to emerge and what is possible, while at the same time, and this is the hard part, while at the same time moving things forward in a good way. So I would say that those challenges feel day-to-day real to me. They feel day-to-day real because one of the things I've reflected on quite a bit at my time at Hollyhock is you have this like aspirational, visionary approach to the work, to society, and yet we also live in the material realm. And so we have to do payroll, and we have to raise money, and we have to sell registrations to our programs. And so how do you do that in a good way that you're not just living in a sort of late stage niche capitalism is something I carry and wonder about. It's not like I have an answer. We're just like fumbling towards more than anything else. And so I think that those, when you ask the question, the thing that feels most challenging to us on a day-to-day level, or most challenging to me, is how do you represent the humans? How do you live into the humanity we know we need, while at the same time operating in the system of late stage capitalism?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the way you frame that, because I think a lot of times it is a race to the bottom. We're trying to transform systems, and saying that we're better than
Yeah,
colonized frameworks of capitalism and imperialism, essentially.
yeah,
Then everything that's built is built from the same lens, with
totally.
the same outcome of
Yeah,
transaction over transformation,
yeah,
production over relationship. So once
yeah.
again, I really appreciate the way you frame that. So my next question is, give us a set of key priorities right now in your work you'd like to share with our listeners and our viewers.
I'm not sure if you've read the book Hospicing Modernity, but one of the frameworks of that book is exactly this. We're in this sort of late stage capitalism that, as you just said, prioritizes transaction over relationship. And so we, as an organization, we're thinking about how does that show up in our organization. And so one of the priorities, like a priority that's really consuming me right now, is how do we transform the organization towards more relational, a more relational operating model and maintain a fair and just economy on this remote island where we operate. On Cortez Island, where Hollyhock operates, we employ 1 out of 10 residents. So 10% of the island we employ. We're the largest employer. And the model that we've been running for the last, well, probably 20 years feels like it is reaching its limits. Reaching its limits. And I think it's also a model that was really geared for, 2002, 2004, 2006, maybe even 2012. But it's not really a model that my take is, the way I frame it is, it's not really a model that the world needs at this moment. It needs something more. It needs us in a deeper relationship. And so the priority we have is, how do we transform our model while maintaining just and fair employment? So you asked priorities. That's a top line priority for us. I think another priority that's coming up for me is in a strategic plan many years ago, we outlined a desire for impact measurement, and we just have not gotten there. What I say is we do a certain amount of impact measurement, but it's very anecdotal. And I think that one of the priorities we have, which is related to the first priority, is how do we actually assess, not in the way of like a matrix with checkboxes, but how do we actually assess whether the work we're putting into the world has the meaning and is connected to our theory of change in the way we want it to be, in the way that we believe is meaningful. So that is what I would say is our second priority. And then our third priority is, over the last few years, we've really increased our what I would call network partnerships. And so we're really looking to advance our theory of change, our values, our vision through partnerships, and find like-minded organizations that we can partner with.
Thank you. I really appreciate the way you were able to, once again, frame out the priorities, but make it clear and concise so that folks can get the high level. And congratulations on being his employer. That's incredible. That really speaks to your impact. So my last question is, what is your ultimate goal? And what does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
I think our ultimate goal is our ultimate goal is to tilt society towards a more just, loving, and connected society. And I think that our theory of change really stems from the idea that every human, and probably more than human too, but we delve in the human realm, has a really strong innate wisdom, and that when in right conditions, that human will choose good, will choose love, will choose care, will choose connection. And when humans are given the space to do that, that connection will drive a more just and loving world. And so our ultimate goal is that more just and loving world. And the work that we do is one of the ways I've been writing about it recently is the work is really work about remembrance. It's not anything new. It's actually a remembrance of our connected selves. And so when I think about the ultimate goal, it's people connected to self, thus others, and natural world. What success looks like for us is being able to bring as many people through our theory of change as possible. Our theory of change really works on a like personal, societal, but the leap of the theory of change is that a critical mass. And so one of the questions we have is, and this goes back to some earlier questions, is how do we do that without acting in a very transactional, we just need to scale it way? Like what does depth, how does depth serve our theory of change over breadth when our theory of change works on a critical mass theory? And so I think that like success for us and my colleagues, and when I think about my team, I'm picturing them in my mind, it's doing this work connected with national, international organizations that are doing the same thing, and doing the work in a joyful way that lights us all up. That's been really important to me and to the team since the COVID pandemic. I mean, probably even before, but COVID pandemic, for an organization that relies on travel, relies on connecting people in small spaces, was a really hard moment. And I think that the joy is the antidote to the burnout and the hardness that comes with running a social impact business model.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I feel like that joy is sometimes it's just so hard to attain because of just the burnout and the hardness
Yeah.
comes from that life of consistently seeking independence and not recognizing interconnection and
Yeah.
interdependence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I always feel
Yes.
the social impact sector operates like a dysfunctional family. Only comes together for
Yes.
funerals and funerals and weddings. That's it. Outside of that, no one else exists
Totally.
in the reality.
Totally.
So I feel like, but in terms of the
Yeah.
context, it's usually around resources and money. And I feel like there's a
Yeah.
huge opportunity to start to shift that as we build our relational infrastructure and get a deeper understanding of the colonized mind and imperialism and capitalism and how it
Yeah.
manifests in our
Yeah.
daily interactions. We move from that place of
Yeah.
transaction and consumption versus relationship. Because without relationships, you
Yeah.
can't transact or consume. So it's that addiction to consumption.
Yeah.
Addiction
Exactly.
yeah, so
Exactly. And one thing I'll say there, Victor, is I think that operating in that colonized mind, it's actually pretty sad. Like, like it's sad and it's lonely. And I think that's one of the like things that I've been just sort of that's been percolating in the back of my mind is the dominant society we live in is based on distraction, right? So it's like you see all these like you see these advertisements for vacations where they say escape. And I always think like, escape what? Like, what am I escaping? Like I'm like anyone. I love a beautiful beach or a beautiful place, but I never think about it as escape. And I think that if the more spaces that we can be honest about what we live in, you realize, oh wow, that's kind of sad. And what holds me up, what creates joy is really these relationships I have in my life. And so why wouldn't we put those as primary? And what is this? Yeah, like as you said, addiction to consumption or accumulation. Like, what is it actually doing for us? Like, really ask that question. Like, what is it doing for me?
it burdens the children when you die. More things to throw away.
That's right. That's right. Oh, yeah, that's definitely right.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I
definitely.
really appreciate your candor and authenticity. It's always such a joy to speak to you, my friend. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action
Yeah.
for our listeners and our viewers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so yesterday I was in a conversation with a friend who is experiencing, he's sort of mid-career and he's trying to figure out what's next. And um, I said to him, hey man, like, would you ever consider just taking some time for yourself, like 4 or 5 days, and going to, a retreat with a teacher that you would just not otherwise do, you know? And I was saying to him that, it's something I've been considering, like I've been to a lot of retreats, but let's say I don't go to, like a watercolor retreat or you know, there's some retreats I've seen that are like to test doing stand-up comedy, like just something really outside. And so what out of your comfort or your experience. And so my call to action is really just to think about that to the viewers is what, as we all pursue this path of societal change and building better societies, what are you doing for yourself that creates joy, that creates movement outside of what you typically do? And I'm saying this to your viewers, but I'm also saying it to myself because I'm very comfortable sitting in my studio here, working on my writing or working on, my emails or working on theories of change. But what am I doing that really pushes me outside? And and as I was talking to my friend yesterday, I got kind of excited about the idea of just trying something that's really outside of my comfort zone. And so I would just offer the same suggestion to your listeners is what's out there, across Turtle Island that, what course, what class, what place could you go to connect with other people to do something that takes you outside your comfort zone?
Thank you so much for your consistent solidarity, leadership, candor, and remarkable authenticity, my friend. Peter, it's always a pleasure to connect with you. And as always at Setsi, we close these conversations, these interviews the way we began, by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands around. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, Peter. I appreciate you and all that you do for so many.
Thank you, Victor.